All right, let's dive right into a huge question. Is morality something we humans just make up? Or is it something we receive from, a higher power? We're going to unpack a really powerful framework from the Christian theologian Cornelius Van Til. He gives a super clear answer and a way to look at pretty much any ethical system out there. So, let's get started.
I mean, it really all starts here, doesn't it? Are our concepts of right and wrong just social rules we all agree on? Are they just gut feelings? Or is there something more objective, something real that they're based on? The framework we're looking at today doesn't just float the question, it gives a very specific, very structured answer. And we're going to break it all down piece by piece.
So, what Van Til came up with is this surprisingly simple way to analyze basically any ethical system you can think of. His whole argument was that no matter how complicated it seems on the surface, it always boils down to just three core parts. And if you get these three pillars, you've pretty much got the key to the whole thing.
And here they are. These are the three pillars. First up is the goal. What's the ultimate purpose? The highest good we're all shooting for. Then you've got the standard. How do we even measure what good is? What's our yardstick? And finally, the power. What's the actual force or motivation that gets us to do the right thing? And what's cool is, if you think about it, any ethical system, even the one you might personally hold, has to have an answer for these three. This is going to be our roadmap for this whole explainer.
All right, Section 1. Who defines morality? Let's kick things off with what is maybe the most basic question of them all. This one gets right at that second pillar we just mentioned, the standard. Because look, before you can figure out what's right or wrong, you've got to know who gets to decide.
And honestly, this right here is the great divide. It's the fork in the road for pretty much all of ethics. Is morality something we discover, like a truth that's already out there waiting for us? Or is it something that we as humans create? Just answering that one question sets you off on one of two totally different journeys.
So here are those two paths, side by side. On one side, you've got the Christian view. Here, good is good simply because God, as this absolute personal being, declares it to be good. It's rooted in His character and will. But on the other side, you have a lot of other worldviews where the good is this independent thing. It exists on its own, and even a God would have to strive to meet that standard.
And this brings us to a really key concept for Van Til's framework, receptively reconstructive. Now that sounds a little academic, but the idea is actually pretty straightforward. It just means that our job as humans isn't to create our own moral standards from scratch. We're not creatively constructive. Instead, our role is to receive God's revelation about what's good and then, reconstruct it or apply it in our own lives. We're more like interpreters of the standard, not the authors of it.
Okay, Section 2, the human condition. So if we accept that morality comes from God, the next logical question is, what about us? What's the deal with humanity? Are we born good, bad, neutral? This next part is all about how this framework sees our basic human nature.
So check out this quote. "Just as sin has blinded the intellect of man, so it has corrupted the will of man. The natural man is at enmity against God." Wow. That really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? The argument here is that the human condition has been fundamentally affected by what theologians call total depravity. Now, that doesn't mean everyone is as evil as they could possibly be. What it does mean is that every single part of us, our minds, our will, our emotions, has been twisted by sin, and as a result, we're naturally opposed to God's standard.
And this, again, leads to a massive split in how you see things. On the one hand, the Christian view says that because our moral compass, our consciousness, is both finite and sinful, it just can't be trusted as the ultimate authority. It needs to be checked against an external standard, which in this case is Scripture. But then you have the complete opposite view, that our moral consciousness is basically fine. It's a normal, reliable tool that we can absolutely trust to guide us.
Now, this is where Van Til gets really, really consistent, and honestly, kind of controversial. He wasn't just critiquing non-Christian views, he also called out other major Christian traditions for what he saw as a compromise. Take Roman Catholicism, for instance, following Aquinas. Van Til argued they gave way too much credit to human reason, suggesting we could figure out natural virtues on our own, without Scripture being the absolute total standard. And he said something similar about evangelicals like C.S. Lewis. He argued that Lewis's idea of a universal moral law, the Tao, that everyone can access through reason, well, that idea doesn't fully grapple with how sin messes up our ability to even read that law correctly. For Van Til, these were halfway houses. They were trying to have it both ways, mixing divine revelation with human autonomy. And for him, that just didn't work.
All right, section 3, the foundation of reality. So let's zoom out for a second. We've talked about the standard, we've talked about human nature, but for any of that to hold together, it has to be based on a particular view of reality itself. I mean, what kind of universe are we actually in?
So what's the ultimate stuff of reality? In the Christian view, the most fundamental thing about the universe isn't stuff at all. It's a person, a sovereign, self-determining God. Reality is, at its core, personal, and everything flows from that. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Many other philosophies say the ultimate reality is something impersonal. Maybe it's just random chance, like you see in Plato, or some abstract idea of the good. In those systems, personality is a latecomer, an accident almost. Even the gods have to answer to that impersonal force.
Okay, now here's the point that feels totally counterintuitive at first. You'd think that an all-powerful, totally sovereign God would crush human responsibility, right? I mean, where's the freedom? But this framework flips that idea completely on its head. The argument is that for our choices to actually mean anything, they have to take place in a reality that's stable and has a purpose. A universe that's just random, impersonal chance, well, that can't be the foundation for meaningful choice. In this view, a sovereign God is the only thing that makes real human responsibility possible.
Okay, section 4, our ultimate purpose. And this brings us full circle, right back to that very first pillar we talked about, the goal. So after all this, what's the point? What is the highest good, the summum bonum, that we're supposed to be aiming for?
And as you might guess, the goal you end up with depends entirely on where you started. If your foundation is a sovereign God and you see humanity as being in an abnormal state because of sin, then the ultimate goal has to be God-centered. It's about glorifying Him and establishing His kingdom. But if your starting point is that human existence is basically normal and that we are the measure of all things, then of course your goals are going to be human-centered, things like self-development or making society better.
So what does this highest good actually look like in this framework? Well, it has 4 distinct features. First, it's an absolute ideal. We're talking perfect obedience to God's will, nothing less. Second, and this is so important, it's a gift of God. And that finally answers our third pillar, right? The power. Since humans are sinful and can't do it on their own, the power to even reach the goal has to come from God. Third, it demands the complete destruction of evil, not just trying to manage evil, but getting rid of it entirely. And last, it's an ethics of hope, because the full achievement of this ideal is guaranteed, but it's something that happens in the future.
So we've walked through this whole system, the goal, the standard, the power. And when you boil it all down, it comes back to this one single fundamental choice. Everything else we've talked about, your standard for good, your view of human nature, your ultimate purpose, it's all built on this one foundation. Where do you start? With an absolutely sovereign God or with an autonomous man?
And that really is the final question for you to think about. We've just explored one really coherent, systematic framework, and whether you find yourself agreeing with it or disagreeing with it, it does a great job of forcing us all back to that very first question, but with more clarity now. It makes you ask yourself, what is the ultimate foundation, the non-negotiable starting point for your own views on right and wrong?